Hello, welcome to Circle Time, the Early Years podcast. I'm Glenn Denny. Now, I'm delighted to have a returning guest to the podcast. He's an author, trainer, play specialist, and the managing director of Inspired Children, working with vulnerable children across the UK. Plus, he's got a new book out. Welcome back to the podcast, Ben Kingston-Hughes.
Brilliant. Thank you for having me. Great to be back.
Oh, fantastic to have you back. It's always a pleasure to talk to somebody with the enthusiasm and like the joy of putting risk into play as well, which is just, it's wonderful. It needs to happen more.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. I mean, that last safeguarding training I did, it was included as an example of emotional abuse. So overprotecting children was included as emotional abuse. And obviously that's an extreme case, but it's worth bearing in mind, isn't it, that we do as a society overprotect our children so much at the moment. And it's taken away a lot of the excitement of childhood, I feel.
It really does. I mean, there is that saying about wrapping children in cotton wool, and you do find that, particularly in like the younger they are, and like there's various circumstances around why it happens, but it's so detrimental to children's ability to actually to self-regulate and to find their physical ability as well.
I think the danger is that it's not that we're stopping dangerous stuff, because of course we don't want our children to be seriously injured. It's all the really safe stuff that we're stopping in the name of health and safety. That's the problem. Is it too early in the interview for a funny story about cotton wool?
Never. Go for it.
So we decided to do some publicity to raise awareness about risk and challenge with parents, and we actually got permission from the parents to get the children to dress up and to make posters, and one of them was a child wrapped up in cotton wool with the slogan, "Please don't wrap me in cotton wool." So this is all great. The photo shoot goes fab. The kid's loving it, loves being wrapped up in cotton wool. Unfortunately, we sellotaped it all around him like this, and he then fell over. But because he'd got the cotton wool around him, he couldn't use his arms to protect him. So got a massive nosebleed, which was obviously quite handy because he was covered in cotton wool. So we've injured a child literally by wrapping them up in cotton wool, and then had to explain to the parent why their child has a nosebleed because we had accidentally wrapped him slightly too tightly in cotton wool. So I'll never forget that. Whenever somebody says cotton wool now, my brain goes instantly back to this poor child with a nosebleed.
But there you go. It just proves that wrapping a child in wool is actually more dangerous.
It certainly is, yes.
So you've got a new book.
Very surprising. As a play specialist, I've written a book about play, and that was me done. Thought that's it. I don't have another book in me. I'm a play specialist. I've done my book about play. That was hard enough to write, if I'm being honest, as somebody with ADHD. So that was it. I was done. And then just several things happened in quick succession that made me realize that there's something I believe is fundamentally missing from some of our children's lives, and it is joy. It's a really simple word. It's, people think it's very abstract, and, I know on the surface it sounds like I'm having a midlife crisis and telling everyone to go hug a tree because I've turned into a hippie, but that isn't the case. It's something I see working with some incredibly vulnerable children. Moments of joy are so transformative and life-changing. And this is a little word, but it's not mentioned once on the EYFS. It's not mentioned in national curriculum. It's not mentioned in development matters or the characteristics of effective learning, for instance. It's completely absent from any kind of training or theories to do with working with children. And yet I honestly think it's one of the most important things that you'll ever experience. So I wrote a book about joy, unpicking the neuroscience of joy, the biochemistry of joy, and hoping to prove that this is not something we can brush under the carpet. This is something that's absolutely vital for our children if we want them to thrive. And it was published, this month. So it's only just come out.
Fantastic. I mean, you're right about that. I mean, I was sitting there and I was listening to you talking about joy and the transformative powers of it. And you're right. Brilliant example actually happened today. I was out with the children and we were just playing. And one of the children was she was very clingy to me and she just didn't want to do anything. But then she started watching some of the other boys. So one of our areas in the garden is a massive hill in the woods. It's brilliant. But they started getting some of the little tires, little go-kart tires. And some of the boys started rolling it down the hill. And she was watching and then all of a sudden she went to join in. And then, like you said, it was almost that you could see the joy spread across her face. She started doing it and it was just wonderful. But you're right, it's transformative.
Yeah, and it's real. It's not an abstract concept. You can see when it's happening. You know when it's happening. You know, you've got children running around going, "This is the best day ever." That's that moment that we want all of our children to experience. And it's not. I was surprised to find that I'm not the only person banging on about joy. There are other bits of research. There are some incredible bits of neuroscience. There's other practitioners actually talking about this word. So I'm not alone. But it was, yeah, it's been a really interesting journey finding out about what it actually means and how we can define it so that we can make it happen more often for our children. And it's been fascinating. Just learning even the simple stuff about things like laughter. You know, laughter is one of the most amazingly powerful processes that humans ever go through. It has the most unique power to calm down our amygdala, the fear center of our brain. Apparently, people who laugh more live longer. It's, you know, we're better able to cope with pain if we laugh lots. It's an incredible thing. So I've done a whole chapter in the book about humor and laughter. I have recommended that all secondary school teachers have mandatory stand-up comedy training because it actually makes us learn better if we're laughing. And people who know me or who've seen my keynote speeches will know that I always try and make them funny. And the truth is, I'm not actually a very funny person. This is my family will vouch for that. I deliberately put in little funny stories about children because it makes people learn better when you're doing your training or your keynote. So it's vital is humor and laughter, and it's something again it's barely talked about, is it?
It's true. I mean, actually, again, you every time we talk, like there's little bits that you say, and it's like it triggers a little memory. And I can remember certain teachers, particularly in secondary school, that had funny moments about things. And that I think it was one of my maths teachers. Now, bear in mind, I was rubbish at maths, still am. I'm absolutely horrendous with it. But I remembered more from his class because he was really funny and he made it joyful. It wasn't just drudgery. And then I think when I moved up a year, I got a different maths teacher. It went back to being drudgery because
Yeah,
not the same teacher. And yeah, it definitely is. It's like you also find it as well, particularly in early year settings as well. If the practitioner is just dragging their feet and they don't
yeah,
want to be there, and the children gravitate away. It's almost like this
yeah.
practitioner has then got this force field of doom, and the
Yeah, and it affects the whole room as well
yeah,
sometimes as well. Yeah, yeah. And it's
no,
vital that we get that fun back. And you're absolutely right. You make whole life choices based on the subjects that you like most. And when you unpick it, it's the teachers that made it fun and interesting and funny. And it turns out there's all sorts of neuroscience behind this, but there's filters in your brain that automatically focus your attention on stuff that's novel, fun, and interesting. And that means you actually use more of your brain's limited resources to work with that task, which means you're more capable at it. So
mhm,
you're not just focused more, you're not just remembering more, but you're actually better at that subject because it is novel or interesting or fun. And this is backed up by numerous neuroscience studies. So it's not new, it's not rocket science.
mhm.
And yet we still have a situation in some schools where we've got children sat listening to a teacher and they're disengaging because it's not fun, it's not interesting, and it's certainly not funny. And you get a teacher that makes it those three things. You want to do that subject more, don't you? It's obvious. Again, none of it's rocket science, but it's so important.
No, I mean, like another prime example of that was like just being ridiculous with the children this afternoon, which is what I do. I love it. If you can't be silly with the children, then why are you in this job? Basically. But I went running through the woods and they were all chasing after me. And then I think we were talking about monkeys or something because a monkey had escaped recently from a wildlife park and recaptured. And we were talking about this monkey, and one of the children came up and said, "I'm a monkey." So I said, I'm a gorilla. And I started beating my chest and making monkeys diving around. And the next thing, they're all chasing after me. And it's like, but it's just that moment that what is that? They will remember something about a monkey today and they'll go home and start talking about a monkey. I'll get parents coming to me tomorrow and go, what was that about a monkey?
Yeah, and are you secretly a gorilla? I've got this image of you now beating your chest. Yeah, the alpha monkey in the I went on
That,
holiday a couple of years ago, and I can't even remember where it was, but we went to a monkey world or monkey sanctuary, which was right next to one of the biggest tank museums in the country. It's down south somewhere, and that worried me slightly because now if you've got monkeys escaping, they've got access to high tech weaponry just a few miles away. This is monkey Armageddon just waiting to happen, isn't it? It's like monkeys are bad enough, but monkeys in tanks are terrifying. So yeah. So
I
I
just,
think
I've just realised we've just moved from the joy of play to all of a sudden monkeys are taking over.
if you can't do a podcast with Monkey Armageddon in it, what can you do? So
Quite right. I mean, I think we've just got the new title for this podcast, but but that's the thing though as well. It's finding those moments through the day, isn't it? You
yeah.
can have fun. You as well. Do you think that here's a question for you? Do you think that some adults, even though they've joined the world of play work or they've joined the world of nursery or childcare or whatever, do you think some adults are still very hesitant to be silly, to be joyful at what they do?
Yeah, and I think it's getting worse. I think there's a stigma to it where being silly is seen as, well, silly, obviously.
Mm.
And we talked to a lot of parents, for instance, who were saying that they don't feel comfortable doing that kind of play with their children. That's understandable. But I do work with I do a lot of training for nursery staff and play workers and even youth workers, and they're telling me the same thing. And they're very good at the supervisory bit of the standing and making sure those children are safe and knowing all the procedures. But actually, what I love to see is that member of staff just giving that moment of joy. And it's really critical as well. Some of the groups of children we work with, one of my staff a few years ago, she used to dress up in skin tight yellow lycra. And it was a sight to behold. And I'm not being rude about this. She'd admit that herself, but she'd do that and become Banana Lady. And those children, and there were children who would not speak to any other adult in their life because they had had so much fear and abuse from adults that they were terrified of all adults. But they would follow Banana Lady around like Peter Pan, with the Lost Boys
Hmm.
following her. And they absolutely loved her because she just didn't care. She didn't care how ridiculous. I mean, why we didn't provide it for her. That was her own skin tight yellow lycra bodysuit, but that's what it's all about. And actually, I think if the people who are reluctant realize just how powerful it can be, because the children I work with have had it up to here with the boring adults. They've had enough of the mean adults, the disinterested adults, and especially the abusive adults. I think one of the most powerful things my staff ever do is just to be that fun adult again, to give that little bit of joy to a child that's had all the joy taken away from them. And it's especially difficult if the children's behavior can be challenging, because it'd be lovely to think that vulnerable children are all really quiet and withdrawn, but that's not true. Some of our most vulnerable children show their vulnerability in their negative behavior. If you can still be fun and joyful with those children, then that's when it gets truly life changing. And I've seen that so many times, with my staff just being genuinely silly, but getting through to children that nobody else has been able to. So yeah, I think we all need to be a bit more silly and fun. And we get all the benefits, the biochemistry of joy ourselves then as well, and it improves our own mental health. So it's a win-win.
Definitely. It's interesting. You were talking about like how transformative it can be for like vulnerable and deprived children.
Yeah.
Like it really can't it? Because they have literally that. So I work with children that have, let's face it, they've got nice stable homes and everything else, but then on the flip side, you're working with families and groups of children that haven't got the same opportunities. And
No.
they do you feel it's they almost need that element of joy, that element of fun, that element of silliness a lot more?
I suppose that's yes and no, in that, yeah, of course they need it. And it is one of the ways we work with children all the time to help give them something that maybe they've not had at any other point in their life. But life is hard regardless of your social demographic. And actually, the more well off families are finding less time to spend with their children because they're working more. And actually, the joy can easily leave those children's lives as well. So I think hopefully in the book I've proved it is a universal thing. And yes, I do work with some of the most vulnerable children, but I also work with quite affluent, areas of children's groups, and they all need joy. And it can be just as missing from a child that's, that doesn't have time in their lives, or even anxiety in their home life. We're all struggling at the moment. Times are tough. There are families deciding whether to heat their house or buy Christmas presents, etc. But even the more well-off families, that they're having to work longer hours, and there's still the stresses. So I think, yes, our vulnerable children need joy, of course they do. But I also think we all need more of it. Adults, children, society as a whole, we all need more joy.
Well, do you think it's again? I'm kind of like visually in my head. I'm kind of thinking of sort of aspects of that section of society that it's almost like, well, we've got children just now that don't know how to play, but then we've got parents as the layer, but like they don't know how to play, but then it's almost like their parents didn't know how to play. So it's filtering down that people don't know how to play, which is quite a
Yeah,
sad. It's really quite a sad thing that you don't know how to play.
it is, and it's actually a lot more nuanced than that because all children know how to play. It's instinctive. It's built into the most primitive parts of their brain. It's almost, it's not that they don't know how to. It's that they've lost permission to, if that
Mm,
makes sense.
yeah.
So given permission and given playful adults around them, they get it back really quickly. It's not like that they're not knowing what to do. It's that they don't know they're allowed to do that, or that they haven't yet had those behaviors modeled in the home, for instance. So we do a lot of sessions, as I've said, with vulnerable children, but we also do mainstream play schemes. Every so often I'll get a phone call and say, oh, things have gone a bit stale. Can your team come along and just do some stuff? And schools do that as well. And I bring in a big load of loose parts resources and I dump them in the middle of the playground. And every time somebody will say, are you not going to tell them what to do? And I say, no, you don't have to, because my staff are playing. They're joining in. They're being silly. They're not leading the play. They're not taking it over and making it about themselves. They're just being playful. And then suddenly you'll see children, absolutely fully engaged in those resources, doing all sorts of things. So yeah, it is a difficult one. It's almost like we're second generation play deprived, aren't we? We've got adults that didn't have the level of play that they might have needed when they were young. They now have children, and so yeah, we all need, well, permission to just take the cushions off the sofa and make a den once in a while. And I think that's what's missing. It's that permission to play in households. So yeah,
It's interesting you say that, and I think I'm kind of looking at it from the perspective of, I mean, I didn't grow up in an affluent household, but I grew up in a house where, I was given permission to play. I was 16 years old and I was still playing with Lego. You know,
yeah.
so what? I can play with. In fact, no, in fact, I think I was older than 16. I was still playing with Lego. I'll still play with it now,
I was going
but
to say, I bet you still play with Lego given half a chance.
I have a box of it on the shelf over there. I'm not going to lie. I do actually have a box in here. But yeah, I mean, we did silly things as a family that, yeah, we used to have like indoor picnics and things like that. And yeah, we would make, blanket forts and stuff like that. But it, I just find it, I suppose for me, it's just, but bewildering's not quite, it's maybe too strong a word, but it's just, how can you not want to play? Like it's just so strange. I really do find that strange. But is that just the way society, in certain areas of society, have become that? You know, I don't know. It's strange for me as somebody that's always had play in his life.
Yeah, I think from being inside the industry, it's very difficult to look out and see because
Mhm.
we get training. We do courses on how to interact with children. We know how important play is. I wrote a whole book about it. We know that it's neurologically incredibly sound. But if you actually think about people who don't work with children, there's very little information out there. There's not massive documentaries on how important play is. There's the odd one or two, but
Mhm.
on your antenatal training, you're taught how to, bathe bath a baby, change their nappy, all of that stuff. But it's very rare that the trainer will talk about play and how it builds the child's brain. They don't say the really important stuff. So it's easy to kind of blame parents, I suppose, and society, but actually it's just the priorities. I
Mhm.
saw a little boy running up to nursery with his hood on his head like Batman, and the mum shouted, "Get that off your head, you'll mess your hair up." And it would be easy to blame the parent, but you can't, because nobody's told that parent that play that child is engaging in, that imaginative play, lighting up that child's brain like a firework display. It's not, she just doesn't know. And I
Yeah.
think it's up to us to perhaps be more proactive in educating the people in the wider community, not just our staff, but our parents and our, and other people in the community, just how important play is.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah.
It is, yeah. I mean, it's that bit as well. Like, so, doing little events and things, where you, not little events, some of your events are quite big, but it's that bit where you're getting out and you're role modeling it on a big scale, aren't you?
Yeah, we did an adoption activity day just before Christmas,
Mhm.
um, and we got an email about it. And the Quorum Adoption, who managed the events, just said the theme is Winter Wonderland. We're not going to say the C word. Now I'm looking at this email, and my brain did not go where they thought to us, and I'm honestly confused by this. I'm going, what? That's awful. Why would we? My wife's going, it's Christmas, you idiot. And I was like, oh yes, right, okay. Now it makes a lot more sense. But we did this event, and basically, children that are up for adoption come and play, and we have a brilliant time, just a party for children. Our remit is purely play. We don't have any remit for adoption or social work. But at the same events, adopters get to subtly and tactfully join in. And that's when they meet the real child. They're not meeting like a scary medical term on a profile, like the child that's got ADHD or Down syndrome or whatever. They meet a real child. And if you're sat in a den making a magic potion with a little girl with Down syndrome, you bond with the real child. So they're lovely events. But this one we did at Christmas, the children ran in with no hesitation, and it was like water flowing into the cracks, if that makes sense. It
Yeah.
was like we've got loads of stuff set up. We've got dinosaurs, we've got dens, we've got potions, but they just spread out and were instantly playing, and that doesn't always happen.
Mhm.
Quite often with very vulnerable children, you'll see that initial hesitation. The first half an hour can be quite slow, and it takes us a lot of time to just help those children to feel calm enough to and safe enough to play. But this one, not at all. So we had a meeting the next week to discuss why. Why was that one so good? And we realized something straight away. I'd got a new staff team, and without me asking them to, when the children ran in, they were already lying on the floor in amongst all the play kit, just playing. And because my staff were doing that, some of the quorum volunteers that were there, they were doing that. They were sat or lying, already playing. We'd briefed the adopters and we told them that even if there are no children there, you play too, because that will relax you in what could be a stressful situation. It will help you to feel calm. And if the children see you as playful adults, they'll come and join in. So they ran in and saw a bunch of adults just on the floor playing, and there was no hesitation then. And I think it's a massive difference, isn't it, between being stood around with your arms folded or actually showcasing and modeling joy in the play stuff. And they've got giant Lego as well, you'll be pleased to know. So Lego bricks about this big, which, which that size didn't work on a podcast, but imagine about 10-inch bricks, or maybe 8, and you can make huge house building, whatever, out of giant Lego. So we do like doing that.
Next time you're having a play event, I'm coming. No, I was thinking about that. It's like, yeah, you were saying about your staff and the quorum staff being there and like playing. It was almost like that was that instant visual cue with
Yeah.
permission to play. As soon as you let the children in, they were like, oh, we can play because they're playing. Great, let's
Yeah.
do this. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's instant, and it was one of those ones where we're thinking we've got to recreate that. And I know that's not always going to happen, because there are children who, with the best will in the world, are so scared of grown-ups that it is going to take them time to realize that we're harmless, that we're not going to hurt them, we're actually going to help them play. But this one event, it was honestly water into the cracks, perfect. It was just a lovely moment to see. And I think that's what we need to remember, is that children will play, they know how to play, but they need that permission. And that, even if it's not overt permission, if it's just a bunch of adults lying on the floor, I mean, not drunk, doing their job properly, that's going to invite those children to play. So
It
yeah, we
is.
love doing that.
I think that's a key word for me as well. You just said that there, inviting. You want them to come in, you want them to play, and that's what I like. It's so. I mean, for my setting where I am, it's the children come in, they know it, it's familiar. They will go and play. They know what's there. They will happily use it. I mean, some of them will take it literally every single loose part we had in the garden and dumped it in a corner, but it was their thing. And I said, oh, that's fine, on you go. But, when you finish with it, put it back where it belongs after you finish. I wasn't interrupting their play, but I was just reminding them that when they have finished, they've got one responsibility and that's it. But I left them to it. And well, I kind of stepped back and I watched, and there was all sorts going on, but more and more children. So one small group of about 3 or 4 boys started putting all the loose parts and doing whatever it was they were doing with it. But then, because they were doing it, it then became an invite for their peers, and younger ones and older ones all came in as well. And it's lovely to watch as well.
Yeah, and they're the days when the adults' intervention can be absolutely minimal, because
Mhm.
all the learning, all the development, and all the exploration, it's all going on. And it's
Mhm.
basic attachment theory, isn't it? I mean, it's if the children feel safe, they're much more likely to explore whatever you've got there. If they don't feel safe, they're much more likely to stay near to you and not want to go off and explore. And it's really simple stuff, but honestly, it's brilliant when it works, isn't it?
Yeah. It's like we've used the word before, but transformative. It's like you're watching them actually just sort of they don't need you. You're just there on the peripherals watching
Yeah,
and the observations. And for us, it'll be like next steps and learning and development and that. But
yeah.
everything they're doing, it's come from their own mind. They're communicating with each other. Like play is this huge world of things, and
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
so crucial.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what inspired the book on joy, what finally made me decide to write it. And that was another child at an adoption day. And he was already sat on an adopter's lap and they were making magic potions. Magic potions, just green food colour and glitter,
Mhm,
really simple stuff. But what the little boy doesn't know is we've got a light box that we've made. It's the really cheap bit of kit. It's a torch in a box, basically.
mhm,
So it's not like an expensive one. But he doesn't know that when he puts the potion on the torch in the box, it's going to glow. So he
mhm.
puts it on the box, it starts glowing, and the little boy starts shaking. And in the end, he shook so hard that he ended up squeezing the potion as hard as he could. And you guessed the rest. It shot straight out, hit the adopter in the face, all over his white shirt, which was funny because he kept saying, "Oh, it does wash out, doesn't it?" I'm going, "Yeah, of course it does. It doesn't at all." But there's a moment of hesitation, and then they both burst out laughing, and that's joy.
No. Mhm,
That made me realize it's not a made up thing. It's not abstract. This is real, a real visceral feeling that made that child have to physically react to it, and that's what inspired me to start writing about joy. So yeah, I pitched the idea to the publishers. They
mhm.
said, yeah, this is needed, especially in a post-pandemic world. And so yeah, a whole book about why children need that exact feeling. And there is some wonderful biochemistry that explains all that, because it turns out that we all produce dopamine, which is a wonderful feel-good hormone. It's part of
Yeah.
our reward system. We produce it when we eat a lovely meal. One of the theories about ADHD is that our dopamine receptors don't work as well, so we need more stimulation to get the same reward. But anyway, the thing that I found out is that dopamine production is massively ramped up. It's a wonderful chemical, antidepressant. If the happiness is surprising or unexpected, we produce way more dopamine.
Mhm.
So everybody watching this knows that if you get a pay packet, you get your wages, you feel amazing, don't you? But if you find a tenner in your jeans pocket that you didn't know was there,
That's
that
even better.
happiness lasts for hours, doesn't it? That's amazing. And that's because even though the £10 note is smaller amount of money, well, hopefully, then the happiness is more because the dopamine production goes through the roof. So the little boy who saw that potion glow for the first time ever was doing all the wonderful bonding stuff, all of the attachment stuff with the adopter, all of the play, all of the benefits from the first book. But he was also getting a massive hit of dopamine because he wasn't expecting that wonderful glowing potion to happen. So there's so much science behind it. It's not a nebulous concept. It's not abstract. It's absolute concrete neuroscience that we need our children to experience joy.
Definitely. It was like listening to that kind of story of the little boy and the adopter. It was that shared connection as well that,
Yeah.
when you said they burst out laughing afterwards, and that will just make them feel even better. And there's that closeness, that connection that has been brought together by that act of play.
Yeah, and it's that's what the events are about. We're creating forever families by those connections, and these projects have created more forever families than any other project that's ever been tried. So they're incredible. We've done them for 10 years now. We've been in 3 documentaries that have been made about the projects. I'm always looking ridiculous. I don't know what it is, but I look like a ferret on every single piece of video or photographs. I don't feel like I look like a ferret, but I think maybe the world is trying to tell me something, that maybe I actually look like a ferret. But yeah, I've been on TV running in slow motion, dressed as a superhero with purple tights on, in soft focus in this beautiful slow motion run. So yeah, these events are wonderful, and it is all about those bonds. And that's the moment when we step back once we've got that wonderful, and it has to be played. That's what works so well. And in fact, the initial pilot scheme, this is why we were brought in, because they were struggling with the pilot scheme, because they thought children's party, bouncy castle, balloon modelers, and it was basically adults watching children have fun. So there's no bonding going on. So they
Yeah.
brought me into a meeting 10 years ago, just as a play specialist, as a consultant, and I said, dens. Let's make dens, because you have to do that together, that you then get to sit in them and you feel amazing doing it. And that was my first suggestion. I said, it's got to be stuff you can play together. And they said, well, can you provide a team for it? And I went, yeah, okay, we'll do that. And so 11 years later now, we're still doing these events, and we do them all over the country, and we just help find forever families for children. It's one of my favorite bits of work.
I can imagine. I just think it would be amazing because, again, it's going back that phrase I just used previously, that shared connection. We all have a shared connection to play. Like you say, whether we've been given permission or not, yeah, we all want play. And play is its own universal language as well. So,
Oh, yeah.
just adults and children playing together. Like you say, you got, when it was previously the bouncy castle and the balloon modelers and all that, that was like, that's for the children. Here's the tea and coffee for the adults, and there
That's
was a
it. Yeah.
divide there, wasn't there? But
Yeah.
whereas setting up just a whole hall full of play and den making and potion making and giant Lego, still jealous. But that's for everybody. That's
Yeah.
everyone is included.
Yeah, it makes a massive difference. And we brief the adopters before we start. We say, make sure you smile, obviously. You know,
Mm.
make sure you get down to a child's level, but do play. And there's been some lovely, lovely occurrences where adopters have just come along and played by themselves, with no children around because they're a big venue. So there are times when there's not that many children with you, but they've just sat there making like a den or a tower out of cardboard boxes. And then the children will approach them, and then you see the lovely bonding happening. And it's playful adults again, just helping those children experience joy. And it's a lovely thing to see. We do enjoy their hard work though. There's too many adults, so it's a really weird setup. Some of the venues can be really challenging. You've got really high ceiling. I know it
Mhm.
sounds obvious, but all the conversations have become much more difficult because the sound is lost and it doesn't
Yeah.
feel as nice. But we always make the best of it, and even the ones where we struggle, there's still lots of expressions of interest, and there's still children's lives changing. So no, we love doing them. But yeah, hard work but good.
Life changing, as you say. Now, Ben, the new book, where can people get it?
Oh,
Because
anywhere. So, yeah, I
anywhere,
mean,
everywhere.
obviously on Amazon and other bookstores, any online bookshops you can get it from. Larger Waterstones, I believe, stock it. Well, they certainly stock the playbook because I got an email from somebody in Waterstones in Edinburgh who said, "I've just bought your book." And they didn't even work with children. They just liked the look of the cover. I mean, they were a psychologist, so they knew what they were looking for.
It was
But
relevant, yes.
sent me an email to say how much he'd absolutely loved the book. And yeah, so yeah, another lady's just bought the book on joy and emailed me to say that the chapters where it talks about the lack of joy are actually quite tough to read in terms of they're really sad. She says, but the rest, the whole book it's just beautifully written, which is lovely to hear because I'm not a writer. I'm somebody who works with children. I have ADHD. I struggled in school, so it is so gratifying to hear that somebody's actually liked the writing, not just the content. So that's, yeah, but there are challenging bits in the book, of course, because we have to talk about what an absence of joy does
Mhm.
to children. And I put off writing them. I put off writing that chapter in particular, till right at the end because I didn't want to go through it myself. But
Mhm.
it has to be taught, and it's not always taught properly. What anxiety does to a child. We still use educational methods in this country that actually make children anxious. If we knew that anxiety fundamentally stops children learning, we would change it. But we don't because it's not taught properly. And so we still keep doing these same old things that make a child feel anxious and then fundamentally impair their learning, their development, and their well-being. So, sorry, that's a bit of a dark note to to
Oh, but
talk about.
I think that actually, you summed it up why play and the joy of play is so important. It really is.
Yeah, I
Brilliant.
mean, it is the genuinely. I mean, this is what I've tried to prove in the book about joy. Is it's the difference between a child struggling and a child thriving.
Mhm.
And if it's a simple equation, everybody can be aware of it. It's if a child has more positive experiences in their life than negative, they've got a higher chance of thriving. Not rocket science, but
Mhm.
if that child has more negative experiences than positive, they've got a much higher chance of struggling with life. And it's not about time, it never was, it's about quality. So if you spend a few hours a day with a child, and like after school club, for instance, you might only have 2 hours with a child. You can still profoundly impact on that child, but you've got to make those 2 hours the most joyful that you can, so that that child can then helps protect them against the anxieties of the rest of their life. And even small amounts of contact with children we now know can be life changing. So, if you're in a nursery setting, you're probably primary caregivers. You
Mhm.
probably have more quality time if you subtract like sleep and stuff with those children. So your impact on those children is nothing short of profound, because you can give them a joy that they might not necessarily have in the rest of their life. So you're all primary caregivers. You sure to get a massive pay rise for anybody that works in early years. I've got a recommendation for you. So I've been looking at how animals, nurturing and how caring for animals and stuff. I did a big speech for an animal charity, and I said that cats don't have empathy. Now, long story, it's because we were looking at the upper brain, but I did offend a few people. And so I had to then backtrack and say, no, no, cats are lovely. They can be nurturing. They can, I've got cats, they're fab, all of this. But I then had to say, well, I've done loads of work with alpacas. And there's a special school that has alpacas wandering around at lunchtime. So the children, if they get stressed, and so normally that would be negative behavior then, because it's the stress that causes the negative behavior, they can go and hug an alpaca and that calms them down. And they've massively reduced incidents at lunchtime because they've just got alpacas. So I'm now recommending that all nursery staff get, instead of a company car, a company alpaca, because it's both transport and nurturing all rolled into one. We rock up to work with this big fluffy headed alpaca, and then we get off, and then the alpaca works with the children as well. It's got to be done, hasn't it? So I'm now recommending alpacas for everyone. I do alpaca walks and stuff with vulnerable children, and it is miraculous just how much they love those animals. So yeah.
I'm going to have to go into work tomorrow, check out my budget sheet and see if I've got enough to buy an alpaca now.
I don't know how much they go for, but they are honestly incredible creatures, really gentle. I mean, what's interesting about that story is that there is another school that I've worked in that's a mainstream school, and they've got behavioural issues at lunchtime, and their solution, because the head teacher realised that a lot of the behavioural issues were at the end of lunchtime, the last 10 minutes, they've just cut short the lunchtime by 10 minutes. That was their solution. And that's not solving anything, because that's not how time works. You've still got a last 10 minutes. All you've done is make those children feel that little bit more rubbish. And unfortunately, that's the difference, isn't it? That's mainstream school trying to cope with behaviour by treating the symptoms, whereas the special school is treating the cause, which is children being stressed, by giving them alpaca access. That's a weird phrase, alpaca access. We need that on t-shirts.
Yeah, I think so. I think that needs to be our new phrase. Well, Ben, time is against us, but thank you so much. The joy of play is definitely something that needs to be universal. So thank you so much. It's been brilliant to talk to you again.
That's always a pleasure. Thanks.
Brilliant. Ben Kingston-Hughes, thank you.